Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our pleasure to present the 1970 production by Federico Fellini, The Clowns. It's a documentary, it's a parody of documentaries, it's a celebration of clowns, it's a recreation of memories, and a whole set of other things. But it's a marvelous film that, what can I say? It's Fellini-esque. We'll be talking about that and a number of other topics today after today's screening. Rejoining us again on City Cinematheque is our good friend Dean Anthony Tamburi, a noted expert on Italian cinema. Now, take this journey into the circus world of The Clowns with Federico Fellini. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to enter the circus world of clowns and of that special Fellini touch. There's a lot to unpack in this film, and we've got 30 minutes to do so. It's a pleasure to welcome back to City Cinematheque our good friend Dean Anthony Tamburi from Queens College, where he's the Dean of the Calandra Institute. He's a noted scholar of Italian and Italian-American literature and film with multiple publications. And I should just say, a guy who spent a lot of time thinking about, writing about, and talking and teaching about Fellini. Welcome back, Anthony.
It's great to be here. It's great to be back. It's great to be back after COVID.
Yeah, absolutely the case.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've taught Fellini over any number of decades. You're very familiar with all those things that constitute being, you know, Fellini-esque. So locate this film a little bit in his overall arc as an artist.
So there are two things in this movie, two statements that I thought were really telling. One is, at a certain point, maybe halfway through, what's your message, is the first one, right? And then there's something about no one ever laughs anymore. Right. So what's your message? No one ever laughs anymore. Of course, no one ever laughs anymore. It brings us back to the notion of clowns and things of that sort. Right. It also brings us back to the notion, I think, of humor as some sort of social tool. Right. We'll get into that. But this is interesting because it is and is not a type of Satyricon, and it is and is not a type of Roma. Right. So it's a real mixed genre. I mean, I think something like 8.5 is a fiction film. Right. Right. But what's Satyricon? Yeah, maybe it's a fiction film, but there's that thing, Satyricon, that word, that name that's always in the back of your head, right? So you wonder about reference and historical reference. And then, of course, what's Roma? Is it, right? Is there a straight sort of narrative, linear narrative, whatever? So those are the questions that come to mind. And I think while some people want to see this as a linear narrative, we can also argue against that as well. Yeah. But that's the fun about Fellini, because he's always making us think. I mean, everyone does that, right? All the successful artists, whether they're filmmakers, writers, et cetera, make us think. But Fellini really makes us think, and sometimes sort of, irks us in some ways.
But I also love the fact that you've already brought up that marvelous moment in which it's presumably, you know, a journalist visiting the set, very common in the film business, who's then urgingly asking him, what's the message? And then you get the clown stunt that they both have buckets put over their head, you know, in this cartoon-like and clownish fashion. And so, you know, that's one of the things about Fellini. He wishes to keep things open. You know, he wants us to have this experience of his worlds that he creates on the screen, and he's very suspicious of nailing it down, you know, well, here's exactly my message, and that he's never going to give you. He's never going to give you that. So there's a kind of constant game that either you engage in, and you engage in it like you were at a circus. What's going on with all these guys doing this? And that circus becomes this kind of model of what cinema can be for him. You know, and the irony here is that he said, you know, it's all dead, but the film shows you it's not dead.
It's not dead at all. Exactly.
Absolutely the case.
Yeah, and so in fact the resurrection It's interesting. The clown's name is Fischietto, right? Meaning little whistle, whatever. And we know what whistling could be. Whistling could be a winking of the eye, right? It could be purely sort of entertainment, whatever. Somebody's just whistling, thinking. It could be winking of the eye.
Right.
It could be all of those things. And so we also need to look at the language as well as the visual aspects that
please.
are going on in Fellini. And it's just constant. So here we have also these two, I guess one of the questions is, what is a clown?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
What is a clown? Because we have different types of clowns here, and of course we have that the pairing,
Right.
the opposites,
Right.
right, of the white clown,
Right.
and then Auguste, right?
Right.
The white clown. How wonderful this sense of tabula rasa in a way, being the white clown, but also white being the color of purity.
Right.
Right, and then Auguste instead is sort of just the way he's dressed. It's dark and whatever. So we have those contrasts that's really, really intriguing. As intriguing as well is the idea of clown and humor,
Right.
and what is humor, right? So we can look at humor if we go back to the late 19th century. Bergson, humor is a corrective, a social corrective, and things of that sort, right? If it's not a corrective, at least makes us think about behavior later on. Then we can deal with humor, satire, the difference between those two. And so the question is, what is Fellini? Is Fellini making fun of the clown? Is Fellini making fun of, or is Fellini seeing the clown as some sort of matrix, some sort of filter, some sort of lens through which we see human behavior? Because remember, at a certain point in the film, there's the clown, and then there's the village A, the village B, the village idiot, the village smart person, the village this, the village that, right? And so where does the clown come in now as a type of stencil, if not a lens through which we see human behavior?
Well, no, and it begins with these recreations. It begins with the memories, but then all of a sudden, I'm so happy you brought that up. Then all of a sudden it connects it with not just memories of the circus, but memories of a particular society, and this collection of characters and of stories. And that's also a kind of hint of a little bit of the structure here. This is clearly not a film with a obvious narrative, linear structure, but it's much more like the multiple rings of a circus, with this collection of stories and characters. But he won't, as much as his imagination is going to be there, in that sequence he says, no, we relate this concretely to social characters that we encounter in the world. And there's a mediation here, there's a change, etc. But it's not just this other thing in any way.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole sense of the clowns conjuring this alternative world in a lot of
and it is an alternative world. It's actually set apart, right? Because what's really intriguing is at the beginning we have the little kid with his mother, whatever, and the circus came to town, and we have this opening of the tent being raised.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you go, what is that? Like at the beginning, it's like, what's that? And then all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, it's a tent, it's a tent, it's a tent. And then like, oh yeah, it's the little world of the circus. And the circus becomes this little village, this little
absolutely
Italian village in which we have all these individuals, all these characters, et cetera, right? And that's very Italian in thinking of terms of the small town, the village. We call it the paese.
Yeah, right.
And that in itself is a wonderful word, because paese means little town, village. Paese also refers to nation. And in Italian, we call Italy often il bel paese, the beautiful, with a capital B and a capital P. So Fellini's playing off of that as well. And I just think it's wonderful. Now, as we look at later Fellini, we realize that he's going to do this later on with Roma. Amarcord, for example, is the same. There are characters, there are protagonists, quote unquote, who are different characters, right? Have different attributes,
Right.
even though we might think they're sort of strange attributes that have different attributes. And the same thing as the small village. There's always someone who's this, someone who's that, and so on and so forth.
Well, one of the things is that it's also so much of it is filtered through memory, and I mean, just as Amarcord means I remember, in his dialect from Rimini, and here you have this kind of double level of how he's remembering the clowns, and particularly how grotesque they are and threatening to him as a child in that first sequence. But then when you get to the memories of the townspeople, you know, at least, you know, for bourgeois Americans, to say, wow, those are some characters he's got there. I mean, they themselves seem to almost be exaggerations and types, but that's because they're being filtered through memory in that particular.
And the little boy, right?
Absolutely,
Exactly.
it's how it's his perception of them. So there's this the lens of subjectivity is always there. We're always aware of that inflection that comes from who's observing about this.
And if we forget, Fellini appears to remind us. Fellini as Fellini, right? Appears to remind us. And there are one or two people who ask him about the filmmaking and things of that sort.
So let's talk about Fellini appearing in the film, because you know, he loves, you know, being playful about identity as well as being playful about genre and all of that. So how does Fellini portray Fellini?
Well, here he's real serious.
Yeah.
And that's when you think of Fellini's films and when you think of his drawings, for example, later on in the 90s we found that there were all these drawings. And I think it was actually the late Peter Bondanella who was instrumental in getting those, in having Fellini render them public, making them public. He's playful. He's always playful. But yet he's serious in this film. I just thought that was really interesting. He was serious in this film, but he's always playful. He's playful. His films are playful. When you look at him in interviews, he's sort of that way for the most part. His drawings are playful. And so instead he's the serious filmmaker, which is a nice contrast to this whole potpourri of clowns from A to Z, right? And so, again, what's your message is, I think, it resonates there. And also the idea of laughing. The idea of laughing. You know, people don't laugh anymore, the idea of comedy. So I think he does that I would presume as a spectator that he does that purposely. I don't want to, you know,
you're not putting him on the couch.
I don't want to, I don't want to give intention.
No, but
ascribe intention.
But one of the things we haven't, you know, talked about quite yet is that we've talked about the clowns, but there's also the fact that he sets himself up. This is a film that was shown both theatrically in color, but it was first premiered in black and white on Italian television, who had money in it. And we all know, because I think we all have watched a little bit of television in our life, that there's a particular kind of form of the television investigative documentary. We're going to go out there, and you have the person who's leading this, the reporter and or the producer, and frequently that can be very self-serious about that. And I see that as what Fellini casts himself in that in that role, and that large, call it the very long second act of him and the crew going out and do they're kind of a flop. Which I think is the humor that he's making so much fun. If I do that, I love the moment in which he shows up at the French television archives, and the woman says, "Hey, I'm Mr. Bellini." And you say, this is one of the most famous filmmakers in the world, and somehow it's both making fun of French arrogance, you know, at the same time, but also puncturing, you know, his own self-image of the great maestro is showing up. Well, you show up and they think you're Bellini, not Fellini.
And you mentioned Rai. This, I think, there are two things that might be significant. One, this is his first collaboration with Rye, if I'm not mistaken. And number two, Rye, this is 1970.
Right.
So, Rye is a channel and a half, basically, the TV
Yeah.
in 1970. And part of what they were doing in the early 70s was they were doing a series of quote unquote documentaries and things of that sort. And another director who worked for Rai during this period was Roberto Rossellini.
Absolutely.
And he did a couple of documentaries for them. And we were talking off camera, and I said I'd met him in the early 70s, and he was supposed to show his Blas Pascal at Berkeley.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And unfortunately, back then, of course, with the big, they call them pizzas, the big cans of film, they never arrived. And so they had to show another film. But it was that period in Rye where they were just sort of starting out. It was a channel and a half.
Well, and you bring up this point that with this film being 50 years old, he's a kind of pioneer to be a major filmmaker. He's messing with genre here, to be sure, but that's what he always did, with everything. But he's now, got his hand in television and trying to, in certain sense, sort out what this relationship can be. And we know from the interviews later in his life that, of course, there's a complete shift in the audiovisual culture of Italy, and television simply takes over. Some 30 years later, and he can look back, actually, in interviews in a kind of nostalgic way to this moment of innocence of the relationship between this, and the major filmmaker, in a certain sense, can be helping television, whereas the film industry will in many ways be just shoved to the side as the television and Berlusconi and others push push forward. So what do you think of this film in terms of it being Fellini-esque in style and its feel?
It's unsettling for the viewer.
Okay.
And I think that's a trademark of Federico Fellini. I want to say strident, but that's not the right adjective. But it is purposefully and notably purposefully upsetting for the viewer, as opposed to some other directors that sure upset the viewer, but they do it through their narrative, in the sense that they create a narrative, whatever, and certain things happen, certain actions happen. But I think with Fellini, it's the seemingly lack of narrative that upsets the viewer, and then the imagery. His imagery is just sometimes grotesque, definitely surreal in other ways, and then the just comical skits that take place that we wouldn't expect. And all of that comes together, which really, as a viewer, you go, wait a second, what's going on? You just get used to something for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden he switches on you, right? And then you just get used to it, and he switches on you. And it happens also with the clowns that he visits. There are some interviews that are like, okay, it's a serious interview, and they're like, wait a second, this guy's making fun of Fellini himself, and so on and so forth. And so, So as a viewer, you come away saying, okay, now what just happened there? Now what am I supposed to do with this stuff, right? How do I take this imagery? How do I reconcile it? How do I make some sort of message out of it? Like, what's the communique here? And I think, now it would be great to have Fellini on the sofa to say, hey, what's going on here? I mean, I think he was just having fun. I really think that, as much as, it's hard, obviously making his film is hard work and months and months and months, right, of work, but I think he was having fun. Right. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier the fact that through the great scholarship of Peter Bondanella, and he got a lot of the archives. I believe they're on deposit at Indiana University. We saw where this imagination comes from. He began as a cartoonist, but he became a famous filmmaker. So people probably packed that way back. But he was always interested in these images that he himself was created. He drew all of the time. And so this is another one of those films in which he has such an interest in the images and the fact that the images are so packed. I don't even say, yes, they're packed with meaning, but he doesn't, one, he doesn't want to have that nailed down. And two, he's very interested in the affect of the image. And that's what you were just talking about. And the affect can be attractive, but it can also be, it can be a pushback because it's an image that's so strong that you're saying, wait a minute, this isn't why I quite go to the movies all the time. Or it becomes, how shall I put it? Just what happened to the young Fellini. I went there for pleasure, but then I ended up scared. You know?
Yeah.
And then, but in a certain sense, the whole film duplicates that for, you know, for the spectator. But so there's a way, I'm going to push this towards poetry in the sense that one of the things that we assume about good poetry is that language is working at its maximum. Every possible instrument inside the toolkit of language is that. And I think Fellini has that same kind of faith about the image. That, you know, that I can create the images, but I can't control how full they are. But what I want to do is to create something as full and as memorable as possible. And that not just the image, but again, this is a film that has these different rhythms at certain points. And for example, what do you make of this? What I'll call the third act. You know, what do you make of that? We have the clowns come in to the carnival. What do you think he was up to there, my friend?
Well, I think it's saying to the spectator, here they are, and figure out what you want to make of it. You know, here are all these clowns. We still have the white clown there, and we still have the sort of quote unquote dark clown, right? We have the light and the dark there as well. And so this sense of, some people speak in terms of opposites, which I think is good. It's something that I'm interested in my own work, the whole idea of the coincidenti oppositorum, opposites can come together, etc. But also multiplicity. Right. And I think it's that more than the opposites. Yes, but then there are these other images in the periphery, let's say, around these two. And I think it's part of us looking at the movies, right? Yeah. As Panofsky called the movies, right? In the sense that Renaissance perspective, Alberti taught us to look towards the center of the painting. We look toward the center of the screen, and we forget that there are these other things going on. And Fellini's a master at that. He's a master at that. You have to look at the whole thing, the whole screen. You can't just look at whoever's in the center or off center, whatever, where your eye is normally. And let's remember, he's coming off of a tradition of what we call neo-realist cinema, right? That realist part of neo-realism, where the images have to be faithful to reality, and there has to be some sort of heavy message that makes you ponder what's going on socially, et cetera, right? You know, you and I, a number of years ago, spoke about Umberto D. Exactly. And of course, the bicycle thieves, and then if you think of even someone like De Seta in that area doing I Banditi di Orgorsolo or whatever, right? There's this whole genre of quote unquote realism. We've got to recreate this and come with a heavy message. And he says, And he started that in I Vitelloni, right? We see some of that humor in the Vitelloni, and so. Here we have something like Satyricon, something like The Clown, something like Roma, something like Amarcord. Those films are really looking at an upsetting of canonical imagery, number one, an upsetting of linear narrative, number two, and an upsetting of the relationship between the film they make and the viewer. No, and that's what I see and that's what's fascinating about. And then, of course, he just knows how to do it well. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely the case. Well, what's interesting one of the things that's interesting to me is that the end of this film, we have this double ending. So I just want to we have this anarchic with the speeding up, and again, the image, there's too many things going on, and you think, are we going to end with this? And then he comes back and ends the film.
It's over. It's over. Exactly. He said it's over. Stop. It's over. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, we can look at that as a number of ways. One being, don't forget what I just did. You know. So go back and think about it. Go back and think about it. Yeah. And I think that might be. That's how I look at it. Is a type of winking. A type of whistling, fischietto, a type of, you know, fischietto is resurrected, a type of whistling and a type of winking to the viewer. Yeah.
That's it. It's over, but it's not over.
Yeah.
But I hate to tell you this, our discussion has to be over. But we came to the end of the film, the discussion of the end of the film. Yeah. So it's a good point to let our spectators continue their discussion about the film.
Great.
If you've liked what we've done here today, please come back to see more of City Cinematheque, and also look into all the other programming that's here on CUNY TV. How do you find out about all of this? No surprise, go to our website, www.cuny.tv. There you'll find listings for City Cinematheque and listings for all of the 24x7 programming here we have at City University Television. So, www.cuny.tv. Anthony, thank you for bringing your extraordinary range of knowledge about all things Italian and Fellini. What a pleasure to chat with you as always here. Look forward to our next opportunity to get together.
As do I. Thank you.
Great. And I want to thank you for joining us here today, and please join us again here on City Cinematheque as we stroll through the archives of film history. But for now, it's goodbye.